Hello dear viewers. Today, I've shared a touching story about CEO Hung and Ly Tieu Ca. Their journey from friendship to love, overcoming hardships and pain to build a warm and true happy family. I hope this story brings you many emotions and renewed faith in love and life. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss more meaningful and inspiring stories coming up. Thank you so much for your continuous support and for being with us. Ly Tieu Ca, a name that sounded gentle, yet concealed a world of strength and resilience. At the age of 28, she lived in a small rented room on the outskirts of the city. It was modest but tidy, and it was home to just her and her 2-year-old daughter, little Han, who always chirped "Mommy" in her sweet, tender voice. Life was far from easy, especially now that she was 6 months pregnant with her second child. Her body grew heavier each day, her steps slower, but she carried on, without complaints, without expecting anything from anyone. She had never asked for pity, not even when her world collapsed. Her ex-husband, the man she had once loved wholeheartedly and trusted with her life, had betrayed her in the cruelest way. He left her for another woman, abandoning their young daughter and unborn child without a second thought. The pain he caused was deep, like a knife to the heart, but Tieu Ca never cried in front of others. She swallowed her tears, smiled for her daughter, worked extra shifts at night to buy diapers and milk, and learned how to survive without leaning on anyone. The world didn't make things easy for her. But in those darkest, most difficult days, she met Hung. CEO Hung, known in the business world as cold, successful, and infamously private, first met Tieu Ca during a charity event in a poor neighborhood, where she volunteered as a local supporter. At first, he was simply intrigued by the calm strength in her eyes that had clearly seen pain but still held quiet determination. After a few brief conversations, he realized she was unlike any woman he had ever known. He started showing up in small, seemingly insignificant moments of her life, giving her a ride when it rained, helping carry groceries when she had her daughter in one arm, fixing a broken fan, changing light bulbs in her cramped room. These gestures, small on the surface, slowly brought them closer. A natural bond formed between them. He didn't speak much, and she didn't need saving. But between their silences, there was an unspoken understanding that ran deep. Then one day, he realized, he had fallen for her. He found himself waiting for her simple messages, "I'm okay," or "Han learned a new song at school today." Even though the little girl had never known a real father, Hung couldn't help but smile every time he saw her. His heart ached when he caught glimpses of Tieu Ca quietly rubbing her swollen belly, exhaustion in her posture, pain in her eyes, yet she never asked for help. He began thinking about her more than he should, not as a friend, but as someone he wanted to protect, to build a future with. But still, he said nothing. Because he knew her heart hadn't healed. The wounds from her broken marriage were still fresh. She wasn't ready for love, let alone trust. And more than anyone, he understood. Loving a woman who had been betrayed, who had carried everything on her shoulders alone, required more than affection. It required time, patience, and a heart big enough to carry her pain. So he stayed, silently, steadily. As a friend. As a quiet presence. As a steady shoulder she could lean on, until the day she might finally turn around and say, "I'm ready to love again." That afternoon, a light rain began to fall. Raindrops pattered gently on the rusty tin roof, slipping through tiny cracks and seeping into the damp floor of the small rented room. Hung stood silently outside the door, holding a bag of food and some baby supplies he had just picked up. He was used to coming here unannounced, but this time, he didn't knock right away. Through the slightly open window, he caught sight of a scene that made his heart tighten. Tieu Ca was crouched beside the small bed. Little Han was crying hard, her face flushed with a fever. And there she was, Tieu Ca, her pregnant belly heavy and her shirt soaked with sweat, hands trembling as she tried to mix medicine, holding Han with one arm while frantically searching for the thermometer with the other. Her face was pale, lips pressed tightly as she tried to push through the pain in her back and belly. Not a single complaint, not a call for help, only urgency, love, and exhaustion written in every movement. Hung couldn't stay outside any longer. He opened the door and stepped in, leaving his muddy shoes behind. "Let me," he said, his voice low and firm. She looked up, surprised and clearly worn out. Before she could object, he gently took Han into his arms, soothing the little girl with a soft voice unlike any she'd heard from him before. Then he turned to Tieu Ca. "Rest for a while. I've got this." It wasn't the first time he had helped her, but this time felt different. For the first time, his eyes no longer held distance. There was something in his gaze, clear, unwavering, the look of a man who had made up his mind. That evening, after Han had finally fallen asleep in his arms, Tieu Ca stood quietly by the window, watching the rain that hadn't stopped. She didn't say a word, just stood in stillness. Hung stepped closer, standing beside her. After a moment, he spoke gently. "I finished the house." She turned to him, eyes wide. "What house?" "The one you once dreamed about," he replied, "where Han would have her own room, a little yard for vegetables. It's done. It's yours. For you and the kids." A long silence settled between them. She didn't speak. Her shoulders trembled slightly. She had known. Deep down, she had always known about the things he had done for her. The hospital bills quietly paid, the boxes of milk and diapers that just happened to show up, the days he sat outside waiting while she had prenatal checkups. And yet he had never asked for anything in return. At that moment, emotions overwhelmed her. Tears fell, not from weakness, but because, for the first time in years, she felt she didn't have to carry the world on her own anymore. He wrapped his arms around her, gently, but with unwavering strength. A quiet embrace that said, "You don't have to be strong alone anymore." He didn't make grand promises. He simply whispered into her ear, "I don't just want to help. I want to be by your side. To raise Han with you, and care for the baby. Not just today, but for the rest of our lives." She leaned into him. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Because now, she knew, this man hadn't come to pass through her life. He had come to stay. To build something new with her, from the smallest, quietest beginnings. After that rainy evening, Ly Tieu Ca's life quietly turned a new page, gently, without fanfare, without haste. Hung didn't make grand promises, he simply acted. Every morning, he took little Han to preschool, then returned to cook breakfast for her. He wasn't a great cook, but he learned how to wash vegetables properly, how to choose the most nutritious porridge for a pregnant woman. Each night, he would read to Han before bedtime, while Tieu Ca sat nearby, gently stroking her belly. Her eyes began to soften, like the first breath of spring warming a heart that had long been winter. The new house he gave her sat on the city's edge, small but cozy, with a garden, a separate room for Han, and a white crib already set beside the main bedroom. On the day they moved in, Tieu Ca stood silently at the window for a long while. She had once dreamed of a home like this but never truly believed it could come true, much less that the one to make that dream real would be a man who came not with vows, but with quiet care, not from romantic gestures, but from unwavering presence. Hung never asked if she loved him. He didn't need the answer right away. He believed that love didn't have to be rushed. As long as, day by day, she felt safe with him, felt free to be herself, to be vulnerable, to lean on someone without fear, that was enough. And then the baby was born, a healthy baby boy with jet black eyes and soft, wavy hair just like Tieu Ca's. Hung was by her side at the hospital throughout labor, holding her hand tightly as cold sweat broke across her brow. When the baby let out his first cry, Hung choked up. The child wasn't his by blood, but from the very first moment, he loved him like his own. From there, everything unfolded naturally. Hung registered the baby's birth, putting his name under Father. He brought Tieu Ca to the marriage office, not for a lavish wedding, no white gown, no grand celebration. Just a simple morning where they walked hand in hand, signed a marriage certificate, then took Han out for ice cream to celebrate their official family. Happiness wasn't some grand, unattainable thing. It lived in the quiet mornings when the three of them had breakfast together. In Han's laughter echoing through the garden. In the late nights when Hung got up to change diapers, still smiling as he did. It bloomed in the peaceful look on Tieu Ca's face as she sat on the wooden bench by the porch, cradling her newborn, watching the man she loved installing a swing for their daughter. From a woman who once collapsed under the weight of heartbreak, Tieu Ca had become a wife, a joyful mother. Not because she had found someone perfect, but because, finally, someone had chosen to stay. Despite her past. Despite the scars. Someone who didn't come to change her, but to walk beside her. To live a life together, gently, peacefully, and full of love.